A reading from the first book of Maccabees. As King Antiochus was traversing the island provinces, he heard that in Persia there was a city called Elamis, famous for its wealth in silver and gold, and that its temple was very rich, containing gold helmets, breastplates, and weapons, left there by Alexander, son of Philip, king of Macedon, the first king of the Greeks. He went therefore and tried to capture the city, but he could not do so, because his plan became known to the people of the city, who rose up in battle against him. So he retreated in great dismay, withdrew from there to return to Babylon. While he was in Persia, a messenger brought him news that the army sent into the land of Judah had been put to flight. The Lycia has gone at first with a strong army and been driven back by the children of Israel, that they had grown strong by reason of the arms, men, and abundant possessions taken from the armies they had destroyed, that they had pulled down the abomination which had been built upon the altar in Jerusalem, and that they had surrounded with high walls both the sanctuary as it has been before, and the city of Bethur. When the king heard this news, he was struck with fear and very much shaken. Sick with grief because his design had failed, he took to his bed. There he remained many days, overwhelmed with sorrow, for he knew he was going to die. So he called in all his friends and said to them, "Sleep has departed from my eyes, for my heart is sinking with anxiety. I say to myself, into what tribulation have I come, and into what flows of sorrow have I come now? Yet I was kindly and beloved in my rule. But now I recall the evils I did in Jerusalem, when I carried away all the vessels of gold and silver that were in it, and for no cause gave orders that the inhabitants of Judah be destroyed. I know that this is why this evil hath overtaken me, and now I am dying in bitter grief in a foreign land." Verbum Domini. I will rejoice in your salvation, O Lord. I will give you thanks to you, O Lord, with my whole heart. I will declare all your wondrous deeds. I will be glad and exult in you. I will sing praise to your name, Most High. I will rejoice in your salvation, Lord. Because my enemies are turned back, overthrown and destroyed before you. You rebuke the nation and destroy the wicked. Their names you blot out forever and ever. The nations are sunk into the pit they had made. In the snare they set, their foot is caught. For the needy shall always be forgotten, nor shall the hope of the afflicted forever perish.
The Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia.
Dominus vobiscum.
Et cum spiritu tuo.
Lectio Sancti Evangelii secundum Lucam.
Gloria tibi, Domine.
Some Sadducees, those who deny that there is a resurrection, came forward and put this question to Jesus, saying, Teacher, Moses wrote for us, if someone's brother dies, leaving a wife but no child, his brother must take the wife and raise up descendants for his brother. Now there were 7 brothers. The first married a woman but died childless. Then the second and the third married her, and likewise all the 7 died childless. Finally the woman also died. Now at the resurrection, whose wife will that woman be? For all 7 had been married to her. Jesus said to them, the children of this age marry and remarry, but those who are deemed worthy to attain to the coming age and to the resurrection of the dead neither marry nor are given in marriage. For they can no longer die, for they are like angels, and they are the children of God, because they are the ones who will rise. That the dead will rise, even Moses made known in the passage about the bush, when he called Lord the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And he is not God of the dead, but of the living, for to him all are alive. Some of the scribes said in reply, Teacher, you have answered well, and they no longer dared to ask him anything. Verbum Domini.
Laus tibi, Christe.
Many of us are familiar with the beautiful Canticle of Creatures written by St. Francis of Assisi. Yet most of us are only familiar with the first few verses of that hymn of praise of God's creation. We can all say, all creatures of our God and King, and praise the Lord for our brother sun, our sister moon, and the rushing water and the rushing wind, and St. Francis enlightens us into all of these beauties of creation that God has given to us. But then towards the end of that Canticle of Creatures, he speaks about human beings and our relationship of charity with one another, and then our passing from this world to the next. Most of us are not familiar with this phrase of his Canticle of Creatures or Canticle of Creation. Praised are you, my Lord, for our sister bodily death, from whom no living man can escape. Woe on those who will die in mortal sin. Blessed are they who will be found in your most holy will, for the second death will not harm them. So that's in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, by the way, under paragraph 1014, that phrase from St. Francis of Assisi. Most of us get him mistaken as this tree-hugging kind of guy, happy-go-lucky, joyful, nothing bothers me, which is true. I mean, he was a very joy-filled man, and he rejoiced in the goodness of creation, but he also rejoiced in this, praised are you, my Lord, for our sister bodily death. Most of us do not approach death that way. Most of us do not approach creation the way St. Francis did. Most of us do not approach our sister bodily death the way St. Francis did. We usually are a little bit more fearful. And yet here he is, this holy man who praises the Lord for this. Now, as he says, from whom no living man can escape, none of us escapes death. He gives a word of warning and caution to preserve ourselves by God's assistance in the state of grace. Woe to those who die in mortal sin. We all know the consequence of that. But blessed are those who are found in your most holy will, for the second death will not harm them. And there's this question, what is he talking about, the second death? He's speaking of Christ's return in glory when we stand in judgment, and those who have died in grace are taken to the Lord into eternal bliss, into the life of eternity in heaven. But the second death is this final judgment of condemnation for those who find themselves damned. And St. Francis, again, is speaking to us in this passage, in this phrase of praise, you might say, reminding us that we must seek to preserve ourselves in the grace of God, and that there is this reality of the resurrection of the dead, and that in that moment, at that time, our body will be united with our soul, and we will either enter into that joy of heaven or that suffering, that eternal suffering of hell, where it will not end. And the freedom that Francis has in saying this. So if we are able to persevere in the grace of God, we will be blessed, because the second death will have no power over us. We have nothing to fear when we're close to God, because we cannot be harmed by that in that moment of final judgment. It will be a time of true rejoicing for us. And so there's this question, today is the last day of the liturgical calendar. We celebrate New Year's Eve tonight. Make sure you're up at midnight. I will not be up with you at midnight, but we want to be with the church to launch into a new calendar year. I'm sorry, it's not tonight, it's next Saturday. I got it wrong. Can you imagine? I got something wrong on international television. I better just sit down. But where tomorrow is the solemnity of Christ the King, and then we enter into that final week of the liturgical year. It's next Saturday that is the last day of the liturgical year, and we launch into the season of Advent then. But to reflect upon Christ reigning over us, that we can rejoice in that. That's what I'm trying to say in St. Francis. If we want to be like him, skipping and hopping in this world, as the movies often depict him, and we look at that and say, it seems a little bit silly once in a while the way they depict St. Francis, and yet there is something that we desire to have that joy, to be able to rejoice while we live in this world. Many people walk in this world, and the cross is heavy. But St. Francis understood suffering, and he understood the cross. And yet this lightheartedness that he had in his relationship with God. He knew who love was, and he loved love in return. And he had that relationship with Christ, who was his king. That's what he said. He got beat up early on after his conversion. He was going down the road and singing and whistling and playing his little tunes. And some thieves came along and met him, some thugs. And they looked at him like a little bit of a fool. What are you singing about? And he said, I'm the herald of the great king. And they beat him up, took whatever he had on him, and threw him in the ditch. And it's basically said, okay, now you sing your little tune there. And what did St. Francis do? He did get up, and he continued on his way. And so this is the way the Christian is to live. We know that we will die. We know that there's an end to our life here on earth, but we also know that there's this promise of resurrection. And with that promise of a resurrection from the dead is this opportunity to enter into an even more intense union with God. Now, if we have that realization as believers, we have the joy of St. Francis. We have the joy of the Christian. This is what the Sadducees were missing out on. If you read this gospel passage, Jesus has been challenged by the various holy people of his time. And one by one in these groups, he's sort of challenging their teaching or wiping them out. And on this one, it's like he stood there at the bowling alley, and you could just see our Lord. The Sadducees asked this beautiful question. They're setting up all the pins. Now here's the situation. This one woman is married to these 7 brothers. And you can see Jesus basically like taking that bowling ball and just like, and bam, every one of the pins is knocked down by his response. I mean, it's like we can rejoice in this great, you get the idea. Jesus isn't a bowler, but, we jump and rejoice in that moment. This is a horrible Saturday morning homily. But bear with me, ride it out with me. But here he is. What do the Sadducees believe? They're different from the Pharisees. Now, the two of them did not agree, these groups, and yet they united to destroy Christ in the end. I mean, that's what you call hatred and a lack of having love in their heart, that you can unite with an enemy in order to destroy Christ, the living God. But where the Sadducees differed from the Pharisees, there's various ways, but one of them was that they held on to or believed really only the written law of the Old Testament, and within that, primarily they had a stress on the law of Moses. They did not give a whole lot of credence to the prophetic books or to the rules of the oral law, which were observed by the Pharisees. It was the Pharisees who had all of these practices and things that were these rules and regulations that were to be observed. The Pharisees wanted nothing to do with the Roman control. The Sadducees were a more limited number of men who had more money, and they were usually more among the leading class of the people. And they were always trying to have this, not a reconciliation, but justify a relationship with the Romans. And so it's very different in their approach between the Sadducees and the Pharisees. The Sadducees did not believe in the resurrection, the bodily resurrection. And we hear that right at the beginning of the passage from St. Luke. Some Sadducees, those who deny that there is a resurrection. They didn't believe in angels, nor did they believe in spirits. And so this is what they bring to Christ, and Jesus speaks to them on their own terms. So they present this scenario. Now, at the resurrection from the dead, whose husband, whose wife will this woman be? Which of these men is her true husband? And don't even believe what they're saying. I mean, this is where it's a total setup to Christ. Can you imagine the insult that he would feel? He's sitting there listening to them thinking they don't even believe in the resurrection, and they're giving me this scenario and trying to make a fool out of me. And ultimately, Christ makes a fool of them. For he answers the question referring to these angels. They don't believe in angels. And so he says, they can no longer die. They are like angels. And then he attacks them on their total dedication to the law of Moses. And he goes to the person of Moses himself. And he says that the dead will rise. Even Moses made known in the passage about the bush. For it wasn't what Moses wrote or legislated. It's what Moses said in his own relationship with God. There at that moment, a tremendous moment of Moses' encounter with the living God, his first encounter at the burning bush. And what does he call God? He calls him Lord. He is the Lord, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Jesus makes this profound statement that gives us all hope, this teaching, where he says, and God is not a God of the dead. I mean, that's almost common sense to us. God is not a God of a bunch of dead corpses that live not on. But he's a God of the living. He is this living God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And it's in this passage that we have a reference even to the religious life. Not that religious are all angels. Trust me, we're not. I might be close, but the rest of the people that I live with are not. But we're not meant to be angels on this world, but to live in that relationship with God like the angels, that we're not concerned with, and that's the beauty of religious life and really the struggle of religious life, to always be more and more detached from this world and to have our focus living or our attention fixed on the next world. And that's the prophetic witness of the vowed religious. Because in our midst we have our brothers and sisters who are living with their gaze in heaven. Always this reminder to us in this world that there is something more, that there is something greater for us, that there is in fact this resurrection from the dead and this relationship that we will live with God in heaven, in our bodies. That we will, at the end of time, our bodies which have decayed in the earth will be raised from the dead and united to our souls, or our soul will be reunited with that resurrected body. Why can we count on this? Because of the resurrection of Jesus himself from the dead. It's just simply to give you the catechetical teaching from the catechism itself on the resurrection of the body. I'm going to give you two quotations from Tertullian. He said that belief in the resurrection, well, this is the church's teaching, belief in the resurrection of the dead has been an essential element of the Christian faith from its beginnings. And then Tertullian, this quote is provided for us, the confidence of Christians is the resurrection of the dead, and believing in this, we live. The Catechism also teaches us in paragraph 1017, quoting the Council of Lyon, the Second Council of Lyon, we believe in the true resurrection of this flesh that we now possess. And referencing St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, we sow a corruptible body in the tomb, but God raises up an incorruptible body, a spiritual body. And then, again, a quote from Tertullian in paragraph 1015, the flesh is the hinge of salvation. The flesh is the hinge of salvation, and this is what I would close with, this beautiful paragraph from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. We believe in God, who is our creator of the flesh. We believe in the Word made flesh in order to redeem the flesh. And we believe in the resurrection of the flesh, the fulfillment of both the creation and the redemption of the flesh.